Attention! This video is very graphic, possibly the most graphic one on my channel, with a lot of disgusting details. So, if you are sensitive, it's better not to watch. You've been warned. Imagine for a moment you have only one single day left to live. What are the things you would be thinking about most? Who is the first person you would call? And what specifically would you choose to eat for your very last dinner ever? If you had to choose, what would your very last words be? And then perhaps even more importantly, what specific kind of death would you personally prefer to have? Every year, several thousand people are killed completely legally around the world. The death penalty continues to be legally provided for within the official laws of countries where a vast majority, that is 9/10 of the entire world's population, currently reside. In many countries, mass and public executions are carried out, and in some, executions are even broadcast on television. In the United States, it was proven that in the 20th century, 349 people were sentenced to death even though they were not guilty. Only 23 of them were not executed. And these are only the cases where the real killer was found and the authorities admitted their mistake. My dad sent me this book as an idea for a new video. Hi, Dad. And I read it. And you know what? From this moment on, my entire life will absolutely never be the same again. Martin Manestier, The Death Penalty. This book collects all the methods of execution throughout the history of humanity. And it's absolutely disgusting, but incredibly fascinating. To know how people killed in the past and how they kill today is to cast a desperate glance at the development of human thought. Well, let's begin. The first method, execution by animals. This method of execution is one of the oldest in the history of civilization. The Egyptians fed people to crocodiles. In India, they were trampled by elephants. Sometimes specially trained elephants were used. They would toss the victim into the air and tear the falling body apart with their tusks from below. It's interesting to think about how they trained them, of course. Being torn apart by dogs has always been considered one of the most humiliating methods of execution. Among the Germanic peoples, one of the accepted methods of execution, which was usually carried out on mainly women, was that the condemned person would be tied by their hair to a wild, unbroken horse, which would drag its victim until death ensued. The Romans became especially notorious for their passion for brutal executions involving animals. Before throwing the condemned into the water, they would sew them into a sack along with some animal, such as a snake, a rooster, or even a dog. Then they would throw them all into the water together. That way it was more painful. By the way, it wasn't only predators that killed the condemned. Sometimes cows, boars, or even rams were brought into the arena. Or there was this method. They would place a pot on the condemned's stomach and put marmots underneath it. Then they would heat the pot, and the marmots trying to escape the heat would gnaw their way to freedom right through the person. It should be noted that executions by animals did not always go as planned. Androcles was a Roman slave. As a Christian, he was thrown into the circus arena to be torn apart by a lion. But, to the great astonishment of the spectators, the huge African lion approached him and began to nuzzle him like a house cat. Asian rulers often elevated tigers to the rank of judges. A person would be thrown to the tigers. If they ate him, he was guilty. If they didn't eat him, he was innocent and set free. As for the Viking Ragnar Lodbrok, he was walled up alive in a barrel with snakes. The last meal. In a significant number of countries, individuals who have been sentenced to death are granted the special right to order almost any food of their choosing, a meal which ultimately becomes their final supper in life. Here is a list of the most unexpected and unusual last feasts. Lawton Stacy, 1 jar of dill pickles. Ricky Blackman simply asked for something to drink. Benjamin Stone requested 1 can of cola. I think that's the best advertisement there could be. Philip Ray Worthman, accused of killing a police officer. He asked to buy a large vegetarian pizza and give it to the homeless. When the prison staff refused to do this, he went on a hunger strike, and after 3 days his wish was granted. James Edward Smith shot a man during a robbery. For his last meal, he ordered dirt, just regular soil from the street. But the prison refused him, and he had to eat regular yogurt. Jonathan Nobes killed 2 women. Before his execution, he suddenly turned to faith and ordered bread and wine. Robbie Lee Garner ordered lobster, steak, ice cream, and pie. But what's interesting here is something else. He had one more request. He wanted to watch The Lord of the Rings during dinner. Troy Davis was convicted of killing a police officer. He didn't order anything because he couldn't come to terms with the fact that it was his last meal. Ricky Ray Rector, convicted of double murder. He ordered steak, chicken, cherry soda, and pecan pie. He couldn't finish the pie and said he'd eat it later. Probably didn't want to share. Thomas Grasso was convicted of double murder. Stewed clams, mussels, ribs, a cheeseburger, strawberries, pumpkin pie, milkshakes, SpaghettiOs brand spaghetti. What's notable here is that he was given spaghetti from a different brand, and his last words were, "I did not get SpaghettiOs, I got regular spaghetti. I want the press to know this." Delbert Jr. Murder and robbery. At first he refused his last meal, but his mother convinced him to eat a cheeseburger. Miguel Richardson was accused of killing 2 security guards. He ordered a celebration cake with the date of his wedding and 7 pink candles, lots of fruit, and a salad with Thousand Island dressing. Adele Bonds killed a woman during a robbery. For his last meal, he asked for justice, equality, and peace throughout the world. The prison, of course, refused him. Adolf Eichmann, a Gestapo officer, a German official, he was one of those responsible for the Holocaust, and before his execution, he requested a bottle of Israeli wine. Perhaps this isn't a very ethical question, but still, what would you choose for your last meal? Write your answer in the comments. Russell Brewer ordered 2 chicken fried steaks with onions, a triple cheeseburger, a beef and cheese omelet, a meat pizza, jalapeno peppers, barbecue meat, bread, fajitas, beer, and peanut butter ice cream. He ordered it but didn't eat any of it. It was after this incident that Texas abolished the right to a last meal, which is very unfair to the next person. Robert Buell was convicted of murdering an 11-year-old girl. For his last meal, he ordered a single olive and it had to have the pit. Why did he do that? The thing is, he wanted to be buried with that olive pit so that his body would be reborn as a tree. He ate the olive and kept the pit. But whether the pit was actually buried with him is unknown. John Wayne Gacy, an American serial killer. Fried shrimp, French fries, strawberries, and a box of KFC chicken bites. By the way, I really like KFC bites. They're really tasty. Gerard Mitchell killed 2 people. His last wish was a pack of lollipops. William Bonin, a serial killer. Before his death, he ate 2 pizzas, chocolate ice cream, and drank 18 cans of soda. Aileen Wuornos, an American serial killer, refused to place an order and only asked for a cup of coffee. Friends, in the Telegram channel, I will post a link to a table listing all the last meal requests of those sentenced to death in Texas from 1982 to 2003. Go to the Telegram channel in the description and subscribe. Execution by birds. People were buried in the ground up to their necks and vultures would peck at their flesh. Heads. Often while they were still alive, of course. In Central and Latin America, as well as in some regions of Africa, the most terrifying execution was to give a person to be eaten by ants. Millions of ants would devour everything in their path, and in just 2 days they could completely eat a horse. Flying insects were also sometimes used. The Hittites gave criminals to be torn apart by bees. Piranhas and sharks were also sometimes used. Ripping open the belly. If in Rome and Greece they simply rip apart the bodies, then in the East it served only as a prelude to the main execution, when the entrails were taken out. Or the case when the Bishop of Parma was executed. His belly was cut open, his intestines were pulled out and wound onto a winch. He, of course, died. In the 15th century, Japanese women adopted the terrifying practice of harakiri. Noble women were given a dagger by their fathers on their wedding day. What a wonderful gift. They were taught in advance how to do it. Importantly, before performing harakiri, they had to tie their legs at the knees so that during their death throes, their bodies wouldn't end up in an indecent position. God forbid you die in an indecent pose. Being thrown from a height. In Rome, slaves caught stealing, as well as rebels, were thrown from a 40-meter height. But they weren't just thrown from a height. There was always something waiting below. Sacred crocodiles in Egypt, stones in Greece, stakes driven into the ground in Persia, bonfires, water, and sometimes soldiers standing at the foot of the tower with their spears pointed upward. In Rome, the stage of a theater was sometimes used as the place of execution for those guilty of criminal offenses. So if a play had a character who fell off a cliff, they would actually take a criminal and throw him off a cliff. Now that's realistic. In Vietnam, Americans threw prisoners who refused to give testimony out of helicopters.